Podcast. If you're ready to grow, then let's go. This is the Lincoln County Podcast. Hey, yo, Matt, let's start the show.
Hey, I just want to say thank you to all the sponsors of the Lincoln County Podcast. Hozak Plumbing, Simply Worth, Medical Weight Loss, Town & Country Insurance, The Guild, and Boyer Academy. Thank you guys for your sponsorship, and thank you for making the Lincoln County Podcast possible. Just want to say thank you to everyone at Boyer Academy. Without the success of Boyer Academy and all the families there, I wouldn't have met all these wonderful people in and around Lincoln County that have came on the Lincoln County Podcast. So without you guys, none of this would really be possible. Having this has been a dream come true to sit down and talk to so many business owners and share my experiences at Boyer Academy, their experiences and successes with their business with everyone in and around our local area. Hey guys, welcome back to Lincoln County Podcast. Super excited to have you guys here again today. Like always, like and support and show your love for our sponsors. They mean the world to us, and without them, this podcast wouldn't exist. And we're just happy to have you here and have you sitting down with us on these conversations. So I have another great person that's local today on. He's going to introduce himself in a second. We're going to kick this off and get this rocking. So thank you guys. How's it going today?
Oh, it's going well. Tory Teasley, Community State Bank loan officer.
Awesome. So how long have you been there?
I've been at Community for a year and a half now. I've been in lending for almost 6 years now.
Lending for 6 years?
Yes, sir.
What drew you to lending?
Well, basically when I bought my first house, I remember just how horrible of an experience it was for me. This was back around 2008 when a lot of the regulations were changing. At that point in time, I didn't even receive an early disclosure. So I showed up for my closing not even knowing that I was in a mortgage for private mortgage insurance on the secondary market when I should have been in a conventional. I had more than the 20% down. And when I went to speak to my brokerage about it, the broker pretty much said, well, this is a construction project, so therefore, if you back out, you'll breach your contract. So you need to go ahead and sign, and we'll worry about this on the back end. And I'm like, well, that's
it's never
not right.
Good when you're told we'll worry about this on the back end. Those words,
right?
I just had some legal things to go over, and they're like, well, just sign this. We'll worry about that at the back end. And I was like, no. They kind of got mad. I was like, no, I don't. As soon as that we'll worry about that on the back end comes out, I always feel like I'm getting screwed.
The warning sign should be going off in the back of your head like, this guy obviously is trying to take us to the cleaners. And it was the case. And in fact, the title company even pulled me off to the side. They said, hey, unfortunately, he is right. You'll be breaching contract. She's like, I would go ahead, sign it, and then you can go ahead and refinance with another company. And that's exactly what I did. And I lost my private mortgage insurance because I had over 20% down to put on my first house. So what came about of this is I was talking to my builder at the time who did all the houses in our neighborhood. And I said, hey, thanks for referring me that guy. That guy was terrible. He's like, oh, really? You didn't like him? I was like, yeah, he put me in an FHA when I should have easily been in conventional. He gave me private mortgage insurance, caused my mortgages go up by $200.
Wow.
Like,
that's a big chunk. That's a big chunk over a year. Yeah, just over
like,
a period of a loan, it's huge.
Right. Thanks a lot, especially with the loan to value needing to be at 80% before I could get there. Well, I was talking to him, and he's like, oh, well, that just doesn't seem like him. Well, then I started talking to some of my neighbors, and they're like, hey, did he put you in an FHA? I was like, yeah. They're like, well, we had 20% down too. So then I started doing my research, and I finally ended up talking to somebody. I won't mention the name of the company. I'm not going to do that. But I did talk to somebody else who worked there, and he said, oh, yeah, so-and-so, he was our top broker, and he got to go on this cruise because he had all these FHA loans and everything else. So the long part of the story is basically at that point I knew that there's a ton of people in my industry that don't always have people's best interests at heart. And in my line, and the way I think is I'm all about the relationship. We've talked about this in the past off air, full cycle lending. I don't only want to be the person you call when you need your first house. I also want to be the person you call when your kid needs that first car.
Yep.
Or you need to buy your first side-by-side. Or you get really successful and you want to buy rentals. Or maybe you want to buy a second property, a vacation home, down at the lake, or whatever the case may be. We want to be there through your entire life. That's our goal. And I lead with relationships over anything else, because I remember how that felt. And in my opinion, that was one of the worst things. That was, to me, the worst thing that ever happened to me. I was in an utter panic of what was going on and had no idea of anything that was going on. So whenever you come to see me, the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to sit down, we're going to get to know each other, and we're going to build that relationship. I'm going to want to know not just what your goal is. Yeah, you want to buy this house. That's great. What do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? We want to be a part of that whole process. So we look at it more of a collaboration than just a one and done, thank you, sir, thank you, ma'am, transactional approach.
Well, I feel like a lot of industry these days is going back to that because of when the internet hit, you could do so much online. You could get anything online, but there's no relationship. There's no communication. There's so many things nowadays that if you even go to talk to customer service, it's automated emails. And I'm not saying with the lending services, but I think they do got Rocket Mortgage and different ones like that. They've got things that are online. That having that relationship as someone to walk you through things is so vital. Yeah. And it's one of the biggest mistakes I've had in business over the years. You hire someone who does not have your best intentions or is talking out their rear end, doesn't really know what they're doing, and you end up in a bad spot and you're left holding the bag at the end of it. It is a very scary place that when you start building those relationships and you can reach out to someone like yourself and say, hey, here's where I'm at. I want to refi the car, or I want to buy a new car, or I'm looking at a house, or, I'm wanting to buy a rental house. Whatever the situation is, you have that expert you can call that you have that relationship and that trust with,
Yeah, and part of that for me is I look at myself as more of a consultant than just a lender. When you come to me, we're going to sit down, we're going to talk about those types of things, and I'm going to ask you some personal questions that most lenders probably aren't going to ask you. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I really want to get an idea of what your goals look like and whether these goals are going to be attainable now, or is this a more of a long-term program? That's why I don't charge for it, but I also offer credit relief. I'm really big in the idea of if I run your credit and I see some things that we could easily fix. I mean, we've talked about it in the past. Adding a spouse as an authorized user. If you know that their credit's not the greatest, you come in a lot of times now, like in my case, embarrassingly enough, like my credit wasn't where I needed it to be. And one of the easiest ways I could fix my credit and also help my wife's credit was add her as an authorized user. Now, that didn't mean that I went ahead and gave her, 3 or 4 credit cards and said, hey, here you go. Now you're an authorized user. But what it did do is it allowed her to take on my credit history the last 20 years that I've done a really good job with my credit.
Yeah.
You can do the same thing for your kids. Yep. So the first time they go to buy their car or the first time they go to buy their house, they're not facing the kind of challenges a lot of these kids are facing where they don't have any credit or their credit's worse because of the fact maybe mom and dad use their credit information. That's becoming more and more common, unfortunately.
I've been looking into that a lot because when I was 18, I had great credit. And I didn't realize it at the time, had great credit, paid my bills, all that good stuff. I had a couple cars, but I realized later on I was a user on all of my dad's credit cards. Well, he had a Dillard's credit card from the 60s, maybe, when it was called Sticks. Like he had an 18, I want to say back when him and I talked, I didn't have a credit card there, but I was on his. He put me on all of his stuff because he was worried him and my mom had divorced. Yeah. And he was doing it so because he worked a lot of hours at GM, he worked second shift. If he needed me to go take care of stuff, I could just go take care of it for him. He'd be like, hey, run down, pay the bill, do this, do that. I'd go take care of it. And there wasn't a hassle because it was our account.
Right.
I didn't understand how it worked then, but I had 30 years of credit history on some of my stuff because of him. We had, I want to say his Dillard's credit card was like $18,000. It was an insane limit on his card. Like, even when we would go to use it, people are like, when we go to pay the bill in the back, the gal would be like, wow. I didn't realize it till I went to buy my first house, and they're like, hey, Mr. Boyer, you got some debt showing here on these credit cards. I was like, I don't have a credit card. What are you talking about? Well, your Lowe's, your Home Depot, and they started listing off all this. They're like, and your Dillard's account's really heavy right now. I'm like, I don't have a Dillard's credit card. I ain't never had one. I was like, oh, my dad's. So we had to, I want to say Lowe's. One of them was really hard to get me taken off of because I needed it taken off for me to get my house because it was throwing my debt to income ratio off. And I was floored because Casey and I are in a meeting with them. They're like, hey, what about this? I'm like, I don't have those. What are you talking? If I had a Home Depot credit card, I have a new washer and dryer right now. What are you talking about? And that's something. But I have seen a lot of that where they're teaching parents now, like different things they can do to help their kids with that. And that's something I've been very interested in watching as Ben and Jocelyn get older to set them up for future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that us as parents, the best thing we can do is leave our kids in a better situation than we were.
Yep.
And that's my goal as a lender, and that's my goal as a father and a husband, is that's my job. But at the same time, that's also my goal for the community, and my role in the community is to teach them about financial literacy. There's just so many things and intricacies that people don't understand. And it's because it's always been like the cuss word. I don't know about you. I grew up in a household where we didn't talk about our finances. In my opinion, I thought we were millionaires.
Oh, we talked about it, but my parents didn't know anything about it. I learned later they were really wrong.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to buy a couple houses when I was 18 for under $100,000. My dad's like, you don't want to buy a house because then when you go to open your business, it's really going to hurt you. No, it actually completely screwed me. So I went to open a business. I had nothing for collateral because I had actually had I had a cheap car that was paid for. I didn't, I had a good job, made good income, but I had an apartment and I didn't have a house.
Yeah.
And I remember that was like I remember talking to him one day. He's like, man, I'm so sorry. He said, I really didn't understand. And, I'm like any kid, your father knows best.
Yeah.
And I regretted it because it would have been huge because the 10 years difference between opening my first business, buying that house, I would have had a lot of equity.
Oh, for sure.
And it would have helped me immensely in getting loans and doing different things to build my business that I was really left high and dry on, and put me in. It taught me a lot, but it put me in a lot of spots that weren't really necessary because I had an apartment, I had I had payments, I had a good job. I could have easily had the house.
Yeah.
But it was a misunderstanding from him. So I've always taken it to heart to study and to learn more about that, just to help teach the kids and to make sure they are on the right path with it.
So one of the things I always encourage people is you don't have to let your kids know exactly how much you make or anything of that nature, but you can always sit them down and you can explain to them what our budget looks like.
Yep.
I mean, not necessarily the income side of things, but this is how much it actually costs to live. Because what you'll find is even teenagers have absolutely no idea how much things cost.
They have no understanding at all.
Yeah.
How much they cost.
Yeah.
Just things in general. They don't know how much they cost.
Exactly. So I always encourage people that if you have a teenager, start younger, start 14, 15, explaining to them, okay, we're getting ready to go to the grocery store. This is something that is hitting hard on everybody right now, is how much groceries cost. And they're wanting to know, is things going to change? Not to get all political, but a lot of things depend on November 5th.
Yes.
So,
very much so.
So that's kind of where we're at on that. But at the same time, like, it's helping them understand. Because, like, with my son, for instance, I had to explain to him, hey, Dad, I know we have the money. Why can't I just go to Walmart and buy this $60 Tyrannosaurus Rex? And once I started equating it to things he actually understood, I'd be like, okay, well, that T-Rex is 1 tank of gas for Mom and Dad.
Yep.
And we use about 4 tanks of gas a week. So that kind of puts things into perspective. He's only 9 years old. Yeah. So obviously, you meet the kids.
But no, they need to learn it now. They need to learn it now. I have so many employees that I've had so many employees over the years I've lost because they they see a bid and they see the invoice on a paint job and they're like, wow, it's $54,000. They think I'm just balling. And I'm like, well, the lift was $3,000. The paint was $10,000. Your labor was $24,000. Like, when I break things down, and I do that to educate the employees, because I've had so many of them quit. So they're like, man, I just worked on this house this week and Matt got $10,000. It's like, well, yeah, but there were 4 guys with you, so that's $6,000 in labor, and then we had the paint. So no, really, I didn't make $10,000. But people don't understand it. I had a similar thing. My stepsons, neighbor of ours, was showing off the wad of cash one, and they're like, "Oh man, he's just balling out of control." And I was like, "Guys, it's really not a lot of money." And this is years ago. And they're like, "Yeah." And I was like, "No, do you know how much everything costs around here?" So what I did is I had a notepad, and I would just give them everything they did. I was like, okay, at the end of the night, I'm like, here's $3 for electric. I remember sitting at the table, and Zach got up to get a second glass of water. I said, oh, is that 2 waters a day? He's like, yeah. I was like, he's like, what are you doing? I was like, it all costs. I was like, and I wasn't charging them for it, but I was trying to teach them a lesson that, like, everything around them exists because mom and dad go to work and pay for it. Right. That the dude down the street with that wad of cash that was a hustler was absolutely full of crap, and that money actually wasn't much at all. And it was an interesting lesson after, like, the first day. By the end of the night, they were like, wow. And I showed them, I'm like, this is how much everything costs today. I was like, oh, and we're going somewhere tomorrow, so let's see how much that is. They're like, no, we're good. Like, financial illiteracy is a major plague.
It's an epidemic. It's
bad, and it's one of the things that I think forces, and I'll be honest, with business, with everything, and you guys, I know you guys deal with it, because I have people send me reels all the time of these influencers putting out some of the most cockamamie, crazy stuff online, and everybody's like, because all people message me, bro, you got to do this. Be like, that's not real. Well, my dad, for example, I opened the martial arts school. I came in one time, I had an envelope full of receipts. I'm like, Pops, what's these receipts? Those are all the receipts for things around here. You don't buy things for around here. Why is there a receipt envelope in here with all your receipts? He was putting all of his home receipts in because someone he knew that was an accountant told him to put all of his home stuff in there. And I'm like, Dad, you can't just write off everything. We're only on month 4 being open, and I can't write off that we repainted the dojo this week. So he put a receipt in there for paint and a bunch of stuff from home. He did not understand how write-offs work, and that you can't just pocket home expenses and run them through the business. If we did, like, I was like, they're going to want to know where the money went because you bought this with your own. I said, now when the accountant does this, they're going to be like, oh, you owe Frank $700 this month. I was like, none of this is for up here. I was like, you're stealing from us. Like, that is a real problem. People do not understand. Oh, it's just a write-off. You don't know how the bank looks at it.
Hi, my name is Scott Lutz with Town & Country Insurance. We specialize in personal lines and business insurance. We're at 502 East Cherry Street here in Troy, Missouri. You can also find us online at tci.u.com. We would love to earn your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of getting back to your point, one of the biggest common mistakes, there's 2 common mistakes for new business owners that happens a lot. It's one, they go ahead and say, all right, I'm all in, I'm quitting my full-time job. That first big deal, oh man, this feels great. They're going to keep coming. Like, I know for a fact I'm going to get this and this and this, or I'll get that first big contract, and okay, all right, I'm done with my W-2. Well, that obviously has a negative effect on your ability to repay, so therefore you're not as lendable as somebody who still has their W-2, especially when your business is in its infancy. And then the second part of it is not having a partner who isn't an accountant who specializes in that. Sometimes people, you'll see them, they'll have a business, small business, and they'll still be getting their taxes done by H&R Block.
Yes.
You need to have a strong lender, you need to have an accountant, and then you need to be in the middle of that tripod. That's how that is supposed to work. And if you're missing any pieces of those legs, like I know a lot of business owners that they like to shop rates and they like to go to numerous banks. Well, that's fine and good, but at the same time, make sure that those banks have the same set of goals as you do. Because a lot of times, some banks, they're only looking at the one and done approach. I'm looking at, how can I get all of Matt Boyer's business?
Yeah.
You know, what is his main goals? You know, does he want to own multifamilies? What does the future look like? And sometimes it's not my job to tell you no, but it is my job to protect you from yourself in some cases. You know, because sometimes there'll be an opportunity that you'll think is like the greatest opportunity in the world. But when we sit down and actually do the numbers, then it's like, well, maybe I'm biting off a little bit more than I can chew right now.
Oh, and that's something that comes with experience. Like you said, new business owners are really bad about that. You get a lot of money coming in. You're like, I've made it. Yeah. It's easy, and they don't realize there's an ebb and flow. Or like you said, the opportunities. I get hit with opportunities all the time. People offer things. Yeah. And luckily, I keep myself so busy that I've stayed out of a few of them. Mm-hmm. But it's important to have those business partners that are going to guide you and say, hey, let's talk about this real quick. Because like I said, there's so much content on social media that if you really look into it, it doesn't pan out. Or it is true, but it's not this new big thing, or there's a massive stipulation to it. It's, you know, they're only stating part of it for clickbait. They want you to click, they want you to watch a reel and be like, oh, that's how they do it. And that's not always true.
Well, you know as well as I do, you know, as a small business owner, there's a lot of get-rich schemes out there. Yeah. There's a lot of people who are just wanting you to go after, oh, well, buy this $40 a month program and you'll be a millionaire like me. Well, the reason behind those is obviously because a lot of people don't want to have to put in the work. Yeah. And that's a society issue from a standpoint of a lot of people are like that. But I get calls on that kind of stuff all the time because I had the other day somebody call me and ask me, do you guys do strictly a debt service coverage ratio loan? And I'm like, we factor that in, but that's not the end all be all. He's like, oh, well, there's this one company, they'll just do strictly off of whether or not we can service the debt from the income of this rental. Why won't you do that? I'm like, because you don't have any skin in the game. And I said, I bet if you ask them more questions, you'll also realize that you would have just as much luck taking out a credit card and paying for that duplex than you would to actually go with them, because their interest rates are going to be in the high 20s, just like a credit card. Yeah. If you don't have any risk, interest rate equals risk. So if you don't have any risk, if you don't have any skin in the game, how can I mitigate the risk? Well, I increase the interest rate. And that's what a lot of those debt to service coverage ratio hard lenders do. And, you know, it's all about coming to them with the right idea and the right mentality. I wasn't ignorant about it, but I I said, a matter of fact, I understand. I see this stuff on TikTok all the time.
It's a plague.
Yeah. And they'll be like, well, why won't your bank do that? Well, because my bank's been around for 200 years. Yeah. And my bank's been profitable for 200 years.
And they know
because of that, because we want a collaboration, we want a partnership. If we are the ones who have all the skin in the game, then what do we really have to benefit from?
Yeah. Well, and the big thing too, I've had people over the years, I'm going to do this, I'm just going to sell the business and do that. And it's like, there is so many more just fine details, because that's a hot thing right now. Buying, selling small businesses. It's up there with the whole multifamily thing. People forget that once you have a multifamily unit, you have to deal with renters and squatters. And, you know, I have several friends that own a lot of properties, and, you know, if they've got 5 units available, one has probably got someone that hasn't paid rent, one is probably empty, and the other 2 are probably on time, if not one of them's late. Like, it's not the glory that everyone makes it. Selling a business, same way. People are like, oh, you could just sell businesses and move on. You know, that's how you can retire. Well, it doesn't work that way. You have to have a person in place to handle everything. Like, there's levels to it. Not, you know, so yes, you could probably sell business for 10 grand, but if you're talking life-changing income or retirement level income, there's got to be a whole lot of things in place, very specifically done for a long period of time, for that to happen. It's not just, just sell it. Okay, your business does $1.4 million a year. It would probably come out about $800,000, $900,000 if you sold it, depending on assets. Like, you break it all down. It's like, yeah, it's great in a perfect world, but is all these different things, are your processes and procedures in place? Are there people in place to do everything where an investor could purchase it and just turnkey the business? Or are they going to have to buy in and then keep... I've had people offer to buy different businesses I've had over the years, but it was all stipulated me staying on and running them. Yeah. It just took the, that financial aspect off of it. And it was still for a small amount of money. It's like, okay, so I'm going to sell this, make this, and I'm your employee. Yeah, that doesn't make sense. It's not what everyone thinks. That social media is a plague sometimes with that, with the clickbait stuff. And it's good that when people have someone like yourself to reach out to and say, hey, I just saw this, because I've sent stuff to accountants before and been like, any validity in this? What was it? The big one was if you buy like a $100,000 was it the 3,500 pound SUV or something like that?
Mercedes G-Wagon.
Yeah, if you bought a G-Wagon, you wrote it all off or something. It's like, well, hold on. First of all, you actually got to have the money to buy the G-Wagon, and you got to have the liquidity coming in to pay the payment on it.
Right.
But then it's so wild. I had a lot of people message me on that one. Man, why ain't you got a G-Wagon? I'm like, first of all, I don't get my accounting advice on TikTok. I was like, that is the first key to success is I do not get my business advice from TikTok.
Well, the other thing is, like you're mentioning, selling all these businesses. I don't know about you, but if I've started the business from its infancy, I'm going to have a lot of skin in that game, and I'm going to have my heart in that.
Yes.
So the other thing to that is how do you walk away from that business?
Yeah.
And then the other thing also is you don't want to become, especially in a small town like we're in a rural community, somebody who has that reputation.
Yes.
Because how do you keep employees that way? How do you sell them on the future of the business when they know, oh, well, Matt's got he's got the reputation every 2 years. He's turning and burning. That it's hard to keep employees, and it's hard to sell them on a future, and sell them on the idea of going the extra mile for you.
Well, and when it's a small business, you'd almost have to sell it to someone inside the business that you nurtured and worked up to that position. And that the ones I know of that really go well is something like that. When I opened my Taekwondo school, there was a couple that were for sale. And, I told my instructor, I was like, hey, some people have kind of reached out, told me, this one's for sale, that one's for sale. And he's like, you don't want to mess with it. And we found out later, yes, the school is for sale, but 80% of the contracts were paid in full because a friend of ours did buy it.
Oh, wow.
And then got in there and the books were not correct. Tuition wasn't good. And anytime you sell, about half the people bounce anyways because it's a new person. It's change. Change is scary. It's,
Yeah.
And with a small business too, you're so close with your clientele. Yeah. That's got to be an extremely hard transition for people to make too. Now, when you're selling like father to son, or nephew and uncle, whatever, aunt and niece, whatever, that's got to be different. 'Cause you're bringing a family member in, you take them around, Yeah. But just to outright sell things has got to be a wild ride. I've known of different companies that have sold for very high dollars, and people just turned their cell phones off and disappeared because there were that many people upset by it.
Yeah.
Because there's a way to do it and a way not to, just like with anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that one of the biggest things to really pay attention to in those circumstances, when you're about to buy a new business, make sure that you get the full entire books. Like a lot of times people, they're like, they want just the P&L. Well, sometimes you'll find out in that P&L,
it's easily faked.
Right. It's easily faked, or God forbid, hey, 40% of our profit margin is coming from the fact that we're paying so much in payroll. Yeah. And people don't realize that. And then so
who's due for a raise? Yes.
Exactly. Who's due for a raise? Or if I'm taking over this business, you've actually been overcompensated. So I'm going to come to you and say, hey, you may not get a raise for 2 or 3 years. Are you going to be willing to stay on board? Gone. Because a lot of times when you're taking over acquisitions like that, you really have to pay close attention to that, because at the end of the day, you're obviously trying to be profitable.
Yeah.
And you can't be profitable. And there's a reason. I always tell people this. there's usually a reason why somebody's so willing to sell it.
Yes.
And especially if they're willing to sell it below what the actual market the market would suggest.
There's a
be
reason.
aware.
Just like a
Be aware.
house, a car,
Yeah,
anything.
absolutely.
There's a reason it's under.
Yeah, for sure.
This wild blue 03 Mustang Cobra bounced all over St. Peter's, St. Charles, St. Louis for years. And I remember talking to a buddy about it one time. Years later, he ended up working at a dealership where the car was at. I'm like, oh, man, I went up there and looked at Blue Cobra once. He goes, you want to know the story behind it? I'm like, no, it was a flood car. And when people would catch on to what it was, because it was back before you could, I don't
Lemon
think you
law?
could sell them. I don't remember what the stipulate. They changed something on it. I don't know off the top of my head. But when everybody catch on, they'd wholesale the car, another dealership, because it was very attractive. It would bring people on the lot. Because I drove it once, and then I seen it somewhere else. I seen it somewhere else. I'm like, man, I know it's that same car. And I had issues on the test drive that threw up red flags, so I didn't buy the car. Windows quit working. And it was an 03, and I was test driving it in 05. So I was like, something's wrong. But he, years later, was like, oh, yeah, it was a mechanic there. It was a flood car. We constantly were having to go through it. It was wild because it was one of those. It was too good to be true for a reason. Yeah. And I knew when I was at the dealership looking at it, the guy agreed to a really high trade-in on my Camaro. And was like, yeah, let's just get this deal done. And my dad was like, let's go. I was like, yeah, I'm getting red flags. The windows, when he's like, yeah, take the keys, just go. And the windows quit. I was like, that was red flag number 2, we're out. And that happens. Now, on the investment side, I just had a conversation with a friend on the way here, and we were discussing with martial arts schools, one of the things we look forward to in the future is investment properties. Has anything changed in those? Because people make it out like it's so easy to just walk in and you can just go sign and you're going to get a house. It's like, no, if you already own one, because an investment property requires more down. Like, how does that process normally look for someone? We have a lot of entrepreneurs that listen.
I'm Stu. I'm the founder and president of the Guild Men's Fellowship. As a first responder, I know firsthand what it's like to pour into your community and lose sight of personal aspirations. And that's why I founded the Guild. The Guild is a nonprofit that offers personal development programs to first responders and veterans since 2019. We offer our services completely free of charge. Peer support, critical incident stress debriefing, our flagship program, Stations Immersion Camp, and one-on-one coaching is accessible by people who apply and are approved through our website. Like all nonprofits, we need people and funding. And one of the ways that we've come up with to solve the funding issue is to take our curriculum and put it into modules that are teachable to your organization or agency. In this way, we can further your mission by putting your investment to work for people who have served. If you're interested in finding more information or applying for our services, or if you're interested in helping by booking us for trainings, keynotes, or consulting, visit our website, guildfellowship.com.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously, first and foremost, we're going to look at your personal financial statement. We're going to see how much your assets are actually able to be liquid. If you already have a rental property, usually if you're purchasing one, we're going to require 20% down. That's standard. Yeah. And then obviously, we're going to want to know how much is your rent income on that property. And then we're probably going to conservatively do an 80% occupancy or 85, roughly. Meaning that we're going to sit there and we're going to look at the fact that there's 12 months in the year. However, you may have turnover, so you may have that vacancy for 2 to 3 months at a time.
So what's the income going to be on 80% of the year?
Correct.
Makes sense?
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, but we'll only do 20% because they're back to what we talked about. We want you to have skin in the game as well. But there are other options as well. You can buy a property, and if it's not livable yet, you can actually buy that property and also do an interest-only construction loan for the first 6 to 12 months.
Really? And
then roll that into a 20-year note. Now, that won't be 20-year fixed, but it'll be at least 12-year fixed. But the great thing about that is you're not having to put all of your money into the table and actually getting it to the point where it's actually livable. So that is a great option because those first 12 months, that's just interest only, and that's just based on what we call draws or advances. So basically, if you're calling me and saying you need $6,000 for drywall, I put that $6,000 into your construction checking account, and that's what your monthly payment is based on, is that interest only draw.
Oh, that makes sense. I kind of wondered how people do that when they buy them that are really bad, because we paint a lot of them for people where they go in, tear them down to the 2x4s, and then work their way back up. And I actually thought the timeline was shorter than that, because I've had a few that they're really under the gun, but maybe by the time you go through closing, get the house, get demo done, might be pushing it a little bit there.
And part of that too, though, is if you're paying interest only, you want to get that paid off as quick as possible, because we do have a lot of people who do flips, and they're not interested in doing the rental, so obviously they're going to do a 6 to 12 month interest only. But the other thing is you want to make sure that you have your plans in place. They don't have to necessarily be architectural plans. You can draw them as long as they're legible, for us at least. And then also your cost breakdown. Usually,
you'll have your estimates in hand.
Yeah, exactly. What contractors you're dealing with and things of that nature. And the reason why we do that also is because we go the second step. We're going to go ahead and case net everything for you. So if there's a contractor that we've never heard of or dealt with, and you're like, oh yeah, he's from out of state, that's red flag for us. So we're going to immediately case net them for you, do the due diligence on your behalf. And then at that point, the ball's in your court. If you still want to use them, that's fine. But I'll be like, hey, Matt, here's the deal. So-and-so roofing has mechanics liens lawsuits against them right now. Do you really want to deal with them? I'll leave that up to you. But I just wanted you to know.
That's good on your part, too, because a lot of people getting into this stuff are not in those trades. Most of the headaches we have when going in to paint something like that is someone that's read about it online, YouTube University did it, which great to them. And a lot of them do very well, but they don't even understand. They're like, yeah, come in and paint it. And then I'm going to have new cabinets put in and then carpet. And it's like, well, hold on. I'm the painter. I need to come in at the end. Or they just really do not understand it, or they got a handyman Bob in the family that's going to do a bunch for them. And then they're calling me. We recently had one. The guy had it ready. We said we're going to come in, scrape the popcorn, do a bunch. We'd get it to a level. Then he could do his floors, do his trim, do his, he had a handful of things he still wanted to do. He'd already done electrical, HVAC. We did all the patching. And we were like, we need a partial. And he got a little, well, I'll pay everything at the end. We're like, no, it's in our paperwork. We need a partial now, because this we're like, in our experience, you said you're going to have us back in a month. We were there. We had 2 weeks on, 4 weeks off, 2 weeks on to do it. 3.5 months later, we still hadn't went back yet, because his carpenter that was going to knock everything out in 2 to 3 weeks was on 3 months of not finishing it. Or the other day, I recently, a friend of mine's mother had her son call, his brother, and was like, hey, I noticed Mom's got these bids on painting. These guys are yahoos. I want to go with you. You are more expensive, but you and Kyle went to preschool together, so I think we could trust you. It's like, yeah, I've known your family and your mom my whole life. He's like, cool, let's get it set up. I was like, awesome. And I walked him through the process, very open-minded. He's like, he goes, I'll hire you. I get you cost more, but can you kind of teach me? I said, yep. Walked him through it. That night, I get a call from him. He showed up, and the guy that Mom hired to do most of the work hadn't actually been there. She had been sending money, helping him out, doing things, and he had not been going over to do any of the work. He's like, man, I got a huge problem. Nothing's done. And it literally was in the same shape it was in from 3 months before when I bid it. I was like, bro, that's what it looked like when I was there. He's like, yeah, I'm not happy right now. Let me call you back. And I kind of walked him through. I'm like, well, call me. If the guy's not going to finish it, I'll get you in touch with someone that will.
Right.
There is a lot of hiccups in that process. So that's good that they have you guys to kind of check into that a little bit, because people kind of get tunnel vision. They're excited. A lot of times I deal with them. They're behind a desk. They're not in the field. They don't realize that there's a lot of shady contractors out there.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Or just people that get in over their head. I think 90% of them are people just get in over their head, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I tell people all the time, like, because they'll put down on the cost breakdown, sweat equity. And I'll always ask them this question. So, are you planning on taking off of work? Oh, no. And how many hours do you put in a week? Oh, I put in about 40. Okay, so you're already putting in 40. So what are you going to do after you get off of work? Oh, I'm going to go straight over there and I'm going to work on it.
Okay.
Well, that's fine and good. And there are people out there that do a great job like
8%.
Right.
8% out of 8
Right.
people out of 100.
Right.
Yeah, because I trust me, I've done a lot of that my years. Yeah.
Or you know, oh, well, my brother is in the trades, I'm in the trades, we're going to knock this out. Well, again, are you going to go ahead and take off from work to get this done? And then sometimes they will, and they'll stay on track in terms of time. I'm not always saying they'll stay on, they fall off track on budget, but in terms of time, a lot of time, they're usually the ones that are coming back to us and saying, hey, you know, we need a little bit more time, which we're willing to work with that. That's not a problem. But I do caution people that, because when you first start, you're right. You're amped up. You're excited. You're ready to go. Especially like if this is your dream home, and like you know,
if you've
you
always
and the
wanted
wife,
to be an investor, you always wanted to flip,
whatever it may be, and you're gung ho over it. But what happens when you're 5 months in, and you've been doing this? So you're working 40 hours a week, but then really you're working 7 days a week. And you're really, instead of working 40 hours, you're working close to 80 because you're also working here. And then somehow you have to balance home life. You still got to go to soccer games, taekwondo, whatever the case may be. How are you going to feel about this in 5 months? So how are they
going to feel about it in 5 weeks? I
Right.
find a lot of people. I've painted a lot of houses for people where somebody takes it on the side, and it's a big one.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, we're going to knock this out. They're like, we're going to go every night, every weekend. And then the homeowners call me going, yeah, they made it about 3 weeks, and they looked absolutely like hell.
and their work showed.
And yes, and it, you know, even if their heart was in the best place, like they just physically can't do it. I was one of those that I could do it. I would take on big ones like that. I would regret it at the end, but I would get it done.
Yeah.
So I understand the commitment to it. And like you said, a lot of people, their heart's in the right spot, and we get them all the time. And I'm like, oh, okay, good luck. Or they tear a wall out and they find something that they weren't expecting.
Yeah.
Or they go down and they realize that all the electrical in the house is shot. Like I know so many flippers and investors that they'll tell you it's never what it appears to be.
And that's why my advice to anybody, whether you're building your dream home and you're planning on doing a lot of sweat equity, at least adjust for 25 to 30% higher than what you are right now, because that might be the difference in labor. Because you may be coming down the home stretch and you may have been working on this project for 8 months and y'all are 2 months out. And you may just be flat out exhausted. And at this point, you may say, yeah, I can do the fireplace, but I don't want to do the fireplace. And that's the big thing, to stay on budget. But also, you know, I'm all for mental health. And I tell people all the time that if you can build your dream home with your significant other, then, and without wanting to kill each other every day and without a divorce, then
I'll never build a house.
Then you'll be a soulmate. That's your soulmate.
I won't
for
even
sure.
go through a builder for a new house. I deal with them at the end as the painter. And I try to explain to my wife, us having the painting company really sent it home, because she deals with so many of them too. She's like, this is one of the hardest processes on people. Like you said, the mental health at the end. And a lot of times it's the painter they call, because they get to the end and they're like, we were going to paint it and we are done. The problem is they call me on Friday night and they're like, hey, the bank told us we've got to have this stuff wrapped up by Tuesday. Can you paint the entire house? No, I can't. Like, a lot of times I can't accommodate, but it's very, very true that they get to a point with it, and it's all my aunts and uncles are all going to come help us paint this weekend. Oh, they didn't show up. It's so common. So having someone like yourself that can really help people and guide them on that too, you know, is huge. Is huge. I've done a few where we went in, painted all the ceilings and doors, and they're like, we're going to do the rest of it. And I'll run into them like 6 months later, and they're like, dude, I'm still working on stuff. I'm like,
and that's my advice to a lot of people, especially when you are building your dream home. If you can afford it, go ahead and finish the basement. Just do it. Because a lot of people will say, oh, well, 5-10 years down the road, we'll go ahead and finish it.
30 years later.
My
parents, I lived in the basement, untaped. It was drywall was screwed up. It was never taped, because my parents said that when I was 20. I lived at home for a little bit before I moved out. And I remember it was still not done.
You go downstairs, you know, because ultimately they still are with us. They're permanent financing customer. So they have their 30-year fixed mortgage with us as well. And you'll go down because they're asking for a HELOC, obviously, because they want to finish the basement now, 5 years down the road, And then they'll be like, you'll go in there and you'll see where they framed half of it.
Yep.
There's some drywall up, There's some homemade electrical of sorts. Definitely not licensed kind of thing. So I encourage people that if you can afford it. Now, if it's going to break your budget, then, and you don't need that space, and that space is really just storage, because my wife thinks we need our base finished, and I say, well, where's all your junk going to go? Because that's really all my basement is. Ours right
is
now.
Half and half, and that's the way it should be.
So half of our basement is basically for Caden to shoot pucks and practice hockey right now, and the other half is just storage. I mean, obviously we're going to finish it at some point, but at the same time, it wasn't a deal breaker for us. We didn't need that extra space.
Yeah, but it's a bonus. It's a big bonus.
Absolutely.
I know I go into a lot of houses to paint them, and when you go down and that basement's done and opened up, it's nice. Mm-hmm. Even if it's not fully drywalled, if the ceiling's painted, stuff like that, it's definitely a bonus. And it's always helpful when building relationships. You can work with people, whether it's a customer that's wanting to buy that flip home that's getting a quote for me to paint it. And I'm like, hey, if you spray the ceiling black, let us paint the concrete stuff down here. It's going to help the resale.
Right.
Because it's going to be a quote unquote finished space. Like it's a huge change up to going to the bank and talking to yourself and them saying, hey, make sure you're using good contractors. You got this one on here. And man, when we ran them through, you're a sucker because they're going to run on you. It's going to happen. I looked at a $2 million house the other day to paint, and the guy's like, well, I got a buddy that can come paint it. He'll do it by himself. It'll take a while. And I'm thinking, this isn't, I think it was 8,000 square foot house, 2 detached garages. Like, it was a monster. And I was like, I was teasing my guys. I'm like, any of you guys booked that as a side job? They're like, get out of here. I was like, can you imagine that? I was like, just priming everything and back rolling it
what a nightmare.
Would be a week. And I told the guy, I'm like, listen, I'll have 5 guys here for a week just to get everything with the one coat, like, ready for your flooring. That's like 5-6 weeks for a dude by himself. Like, that's are you ready for that type of timeline commitment? I don't know who he went with, but he didn't go with us. I'm kind of glad because it was a monster of a job. It was a big one. But it's important to have those people and value those opinions. When I go to do stuff and I talk to someone, they're like, hey man, I would do X, Y, and Z. I step back and look, okay, who are they? Do I value that opinion? Great, I'm going to take that. Because it does help, whether you're investing, flipping, whatever. And I believe that, having a good relationship with your banker, your doctor, your accountant, your mechanic, like, there are things you have to do. And I've learned that over the years, that that comes before so much else. You may, this person over here may be offering you a really sweet deal, but there's a reason you go here.
Well, you gotta make sure that your brain trust is in on the process,
Yes.
and that's the thing is, like, at the end of the day, I can't tell you yes or no on a project. I can't tell you whether to apply for it or any of that. Legally, I can't.
Yeah.
But if you come to me and you say, hey, Tory, I'm kind of on the fence. We're running the numbers. Like, what do you think? And I can easily tell you whether or not you have the ability to afford the project. I can easily tell you whether or not, the risk that could be involved with that project and how we're going to mitigate that risk. Or in our case, as the banker, how are we going to charge the interest rate based on how risky that project is as well, which is all invaluable in making a decision on whether or not you're going to take that next step.
Yeah. Well, and it's just so important. I think that's my favorite thing about the Lincoln County community is we have that there. We have those trusted professionals. We are an open community where we're not going to lead each other in the wrong direction because you're going to see them at the grocery store. You're going to see them places. One of the biggest things that's ever bothered me with the painting company is having fallings out with any contractors or any clients or have something to where it is not fixable because we do live in the same community. And I've always tried not to have that. I go into the schools. I was at 9th grade center today. I've got a program starting at Quiver Park. I got a lot of stuff going. I know so many people that it is important to have that to go to. And I know that, I'll be on the phone doing something with somebody that's out of state, and I'll be like, I'm gonna run up to the bank and do this. Or like, you're gonna run up there? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm gonna run up and get checks or whatever it is I got to do.
Yeah.
Because you go talk to those people. My accountant, whatever it is, it's all in Lincoln County. Yeah. And that's been the best thing about this podcast is getting to sit down and talk to so many people about what Lincoln County is about and meeting so many of the faces in Lincoln County. So I really appreciate you coming on today. How can people get a hold of you and find you to use your services, check out the bank? I've been a member there for years. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're open Monday through Saturday. Not this Monday because it's Columbus Day. But
I didn't think about that.
Yeah, we're closed on all the holidays that most people don't call holidays. Monday through Friday we're open 8 to 5, and then on Saturdays we're open 8 to noon. Awesome. So you can call up there. Our number is 636-528-6088. Or you can even shoot me a text. My cell's 816-686-4654. I know that's a Kansas City number, but I actually have spent 30 years in Lincoln County. We had a mistake when we went out to Kansas City for 4 years and realized that was not where we wanted to be.
I think it's a Minnesota number, and I've had their number in my phone for 15 years, and it's still out of state. I noticed it the other day when sending them something. I was like, damn, that's still the same number. Yeah, it happens. But that's great that people can reach out to you. I know I'll do wire transfer stuff to school, and I can shoot you a text.
Yeah.
I'm going to be doing probably one a month with him because we're getting a big rebrand going and getting a ton of new equipment between now. I'm trying to have everything in-house before Christmas. I'm sending him stuff this afternoon, so I'll be reaching out to you because it's the only way I pay him, and that's where I'm getting everything. So, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you being here.
Matt.
If you guys want to check it out, check everybody at Community State Bank out. I appreciate Tory coming on today, and we appreciate you guys liking, sharing, and sharing the podcast to everybody so they can learn about Lincoln County and what's going on here.